I started seeing this thing happen where sometimes those emails that were like your perfect emails, they get a little bit less response. Maybe you got a great ad campaign, you get a little bit less response. Slowly over time, it's not enough to freak you out necessarily, but it keeps going. And I'd seen this across the board with all of the marketing. It slowly started to degrade, and you like, what is going on? This is my best opener, right? This is my best source. All my customers come from this site or this partner, this referral. I'm like, what is that? And I realized it's this nasty thing called disconnected marketing. So the solution to disconnected marketing and these declining rates is what I like to call connect to market. I didn't even start it to reconnect with customers, to do this connect to market thing. I started it to make content. I started it to make more noise, right? So it was good content, but then this remarkable thing happened. There was no sales cycle. There was none of that back and forth of like, give me this discount and, let's haggle over things and let me ghost you for 6 months. And so we got our teams together and they scoped out what would turn into a large $80,000 deal. And we just had a great conversation. There's something about creating an art piece together, something about creating anything together. Maybe we're not drawing, right? Maybe we're doing an interview together, but because you created something together, there's a bond there, and you create this with your customer. Like, who better to create this with than your actual customer? And sure enough, your business then prospers from it. Start ugly. Don't even worry, but just start. What you'll find is have a conversation with a customer, ask them about their day, ask them about what their challenges are, what they're excited about, what the next step is. Like, just get to know them. That reflects so positively in your marketing. All those things we talked about, those campaigns, those ads, those things that have stopped working are going to start working again, because you're going to start learning things within the first 5 minutes.
Welcome to the Afluencer podcast. We got a special treat for our small business friends. I know it's many of you looking for ways to market your company in a cost-effective manner, kind of get ahead of a lot of these trends where we're seeing more and more referrals. I am on my end from AI engines, ChatGPT, things like this. The landscape is really shifting, I think, on the marketing side, the B2B, especially the small business marketing side. So we brought on Casey Cheshire today. He's the founder, chief evangelist of his own company, Ringmaster. Casey is a specialist in podcasts and other, I would say, guerrilla type marketing things. I maybe to use an old school term there, but we wanted to pick Casey's brain. And Casey, welcome. I'm going to put you on the spot to start it off. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about some unconventional marketing strategy that you've seen working today. Maybe something that surprised you a little bit in terms of how well it's worked.
Heck yeah, man, dude. Happy to be here. So stoked. I love the podcast format. I love the connecting with other people. But you know what? I am a traditional marketer who has seen the light. Here's the situation, right? I did all this work in marketing automation, the HubSpots of the world, the emails, all that digital marketing. And I started seeing this thing happen where sometimes those emails that were like your perfect emails, they get a little bit less response. And I wonder if anyone listening too has experienced this, where maybe you got a great ad campaign, you get a little bit less response. Slowly over time, it's not enough to freak you out necessarily, but it keeps going. And I'd seen this across the board with all of the marketing and you name it, whether it's, an ad you put out there, whether it was that digital campaign, whatever that go-to source was, it slowly started to degrade. And you like, what is going on? This is my best opener, right? This is my best source. All my customers come from this site or this partner, this referral. I'm like, what is that? And I realized it's this nasty thing called disconnected marketing. And one of the ways you can figure out if you've got disconnected marketing, I'd even ask you, right? You don't have to answer this, but we can mentally picture this. If I were to ask you, can you name 7 of your customers by company name? You think you got that? Pretty much.
I do, Casey, but I guess I'm fortunate because I get to talk to them on the podcast format here.
Yes.
So I can, but this is actually a big one, right? Because probably the last 7 I would rattle off would be, most of them would be podcast guests, right? Because you talk to them here,
folks you
right?
talk
you get to know them, and then you talk to them after, right?
Well, here's the thing, and you would ace this too, but I didn't before I had the pod and before I did some of these other techniques. Because then the follow-on question is, can you name 7 of your customers by first and last name? And whatever that delay is in between, you going, yeah, I totally got this. Even if you got it, even if you can name them, there's usually a delay, not so much for the podcasters out there, and the folks doing things to combat that disconnected marketing. But if you're not careful, those declining numbers, and guess what? AI doesn't help with this. It actually hurts. AI makes it noisier. AI makes it so it's even murkier and even harder to tell who you can trust. Man, so I realized after doing all these companies and doing marketing, all this email, and you buy more and more tech to put in front of you. Oh, what CRM are you using? Oh, I use this, I use that. And guess what? It was always the wrong question. So I became this victim in the company I was at of just disconnected marketing. And so one of the things that I realized I needed to do was I needed to go ahead and figure that out and go ahead and fix that. And so the solution to disconnected marketing and these declining rates is what I like to call connect to market. Connect to market.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Case, because I found that as both as a marketer and then a lot of our tools we use, right? I'm a consumer in that respect, right? We've got and you see when you sign up for everything's the same. I mean, when I started doing follow-up emails 15 years ago, I don't know, 20 years ago, it was kind of unique, right? Oh, wow, a follow-up email from MailChimp or whatever you were using. And even though it was automated because you were the first to do it, it still kind of looked personal. But I think everyone's got the same. Everything looks the same now. I'm with you on that respect. Because when I sign up for a tool, you get the free trial, you get the fake email from the CEO that acts like they really read it, but they don't, right? So there's a lot of that. And you can tell that it's not real because I know when I get on a call with someone and we'll do these either podcast or a walkthrough, right? To just talk about our product and kind of go through the platforms. I mean, they're shocked when you turn on the camera and it's really you, right? They're not like, isn't this you? Isn't this your company? Like, well, right. Yeah, that's kind of the point, right? You don't want to just talk to someone who's been here 2 months or doesn't really know what they're doing. So that's, I think that's really interesting. So what led you then to, would you say the podcast is kind of your go-to tool now to break through the noise and get personal? Take us through that. Like, what are you looking at in terms of that? Because I hear you on the email automation. I was kind of nodding my head. Even things like Google AdWords, and I know that's more kind of filling the funnel, but I found stuff like that is it get more and more expensive. It works less and less. So I've intuitively, I think, kind of struggled with the same things that you've described, right? Where it's like, well, this isn't working, and I know it's worked for me for the last 15 years through various, but it seems like it's not working anymore. And kind of got about a car conversation with yourself and say, okay, well, what works now? What do we actually believe in? So what led you to kind of believe in podcasts and maybe other personalized channels?
I started a podcast. And I didn't even start it to reconnect with customers, to do this connect to market thing. I started it to make content. I started it to make more noise, right? I needed to write blog posts and I didn't have time. Sometimes 12 people see them, sometimes 1,200. And the difference might be, was there an attractive person on the cover, right? Like you never really knew if all that time you invested in all that content or money was going to actually pay off. And so I just started a podcast because I thought, I like talking to people. I could interview some folks and learn some things. And it did. It made a ton of content, made a ton of noise, but good noise. It was like a better noise because it was real. It was like two wizards, like you and I were two wizards chatting, and like, man, I want to hear that conversation. So it was good content. But then this remarkable thing happened where I was chatting with this really amazing, what would become like a future customer. And she was the CMO of this big company. And after this great podcast, we really hit it off, right? We had done a prep call together, done a podcast together, and we were just, the recording was done and we just chit-chatting, catching up. We really just built a rapport. And she mentioned, oh, by the way, my team, it's big, company that she ran the marketing team for. My team is migrating off of this one software onto this other tool. She said that she was migrating onto the tool that my last company specialized in, right? She's like, oh, we're migrating to Pardot. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what we specialize in. She's like, really? I didn't know that. And I didn't know that either. Neither of us knew that she was looking for something. And then I had the team that literally specialized in exactly what she's asking for. And it was like, well, no kidding. Let's just do this. So we got our teams together and they scoped out what would turn into it was for us a large $80,000 deal. And there was no sales cycle. There was none of that back and forth of like, give me this discount and let's haggle over things and let me ghost you for 6 months. And we just got the teams together, they scoped it out, and we did the deal, right? It was like a friends and family deal. And I thought, man, something's going on here. And it was on accident. Could I make this happen on purpose? And I set out to do that. So I found all the companies in North America that had that same tool that I worked with. And I invited all their CMOs. Insert your decision maker, insert your customer, the person who can sign that agreement, whoever they are. But I went and invited all of those people to be guests on my podcast. And almost all of them say yes, because it's a compliment. Thank you for the compliment of inviting me on your podcast. No one says no to that. Absolutely. Thank you. And so they were grateful to be on the pod. They absolutely showed up. And you can't not pay attention on a podcast. So contrast that with a sales call where you're like checking your email and they're kind of zoning out. A podcast, I'm locked in, because if I don't, you might ask me a question I don't know the answer to, I haven't thought of, and man, I'm going to look like an idiot. So people are so locked in. And when you're just staring at each other for an hour and change, which is how long my show went, we built some rapport. We really got to know each other. And so we repeated this process with many, 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 many more what would become future customers and partners. And even the people who weren't in market became friends, and then would be referring all of their network to me. And that really grew that company to the point where I was able to sell it. Right. So this was just like an eye opener for me. I hadn't planned on it. I just liked connecting with people. And lo and behold, it became the solution to that disconnected marketing.
Yeah, very cool. That's interesting. So you essentially replace the whole, hey, let's do a sales call, demos, the things everyone hates, right? You just get on the horn, start recording podcast, and it's going to get out there, and it's a way for them to promote, but you're talking, huh? Just talking through the solutions.
Just talking. And the idea is make them the star. So it wasn't like the Casey show, which sounds great. And one day I might make that just for fun. So I can interview some crazy people. But no, this was like a marketing podcast for marketing leaders. Essentially, insert whatever your ideal buyer is. This is the show about them. And so you make a show about your customer and you honor them and you give them the spotlight and the platform. And you say, let's learn about what makes you so good so you can share it with other people who are probably struggling with the same thing. So I made it about them. And, we'd do these little prep calls where we would get on, and I started building trust on the prep calls, because one of the ingredients of trust, right? And there's an old Zig Ziglar quote: if people like you, they'll listen to you, but if they trust you, now they'll buy from you, right? So I'm like, how do I get to trust? Well, in that prep call, I would tell them, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. I'm going to ask you this question, and then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. Guess what? It did happen, right? So the idea of saying something you're going to do and then actually doing it became a foundation of trust. So you're right. We got to skip all that BS marketing stuff that often just wasted a ton of money and time. And we just had a great conversation. And then lo and behold, they trusted me on the outcome of that, because I had built little experiences they could believe in, and they could understand, oh yeah, he said this would happen. It did. And then guess what? They make a great episode. They're excited. And there's something about creating an art piece together, something about creating anything together. Maybe we're not drawing, right? Maybe we're doing an interview together, but because you created something together, there's a bond there, and you create this with your customer. Like, who better to create this with than your actual customer? And sure enough, your business then prospers from it.
Yeah, it's a very cool concept. So if we try to apply this, Casey, and as I mentioned in our pre-call chat, right, we've got a lot of small business owners, marketers on the line watching this, listening to this, and figuring out ways that they can grow their business. And especially today, and when a lot of the traditional stuff's not working, the automation stuff is just kind of automated. Doesn't have a life to it. So kind of I'm sure nodding their heads. This all sounds great, right? Makes sense, intuitive, the connection, the trust. But I can speak from experience, as I know you can. It's daunting, right, to set it up, because between when we had the idea, hey, we should do a podcast, and we actually did it, there was time in between, right? And ultimately, you just have to jump in and do it. But that, I know, is always the hurdle for people to get over. Like, hey, this is something we should do. It's probably on the yearly marketing plans. Like, hey, this is something we should do this year, and maybe you just never get to it, because every time you look at it, gives you a little bit of a headache, right? You're like, I'm already well, let me just do something I already know. This is something you don't necessarily know how to do. You got to get the video equipment and, make sure the battery's charged, and you get your mic. You're right, I got my microphone here. And then you book the guests and you've got the content. Then you figure out how to get it out there. We're going to YouTube. We're doing Spotify. We're doing a combination, right? So we kind of break it down from, let's use like a small business, person's example, right? And they're trying to promote the company. They're interested in starting a podcast. Where do you even start in terms of walking them through the process? Where's the first few steps?
Yeah, I think, the first step is just to warn people exactly about what you're talking about. And there's this fun concept, I guess fun for some people, pod fading, right? I don't know if you bumped into that. The idea of a pod fade for those listening is you start a podcast all excited, and then 12, I think is the average, 8 to 12 or less episodes in, you realize no one's watching and this is a ton of work, right? And then I don't even know if it looks that great. And so then I'm going to stop doing it. So there are something on the order of 4 or 5 million podcasts that have been created. But in the last, say, 30 to 60 days, only about 240,000 of them have had an update in the last 30 days. What is that? Well, that's this pod fading concept. And you're right. It is tough. It is tough. And so acknowledging that, right, that there's some challenge to it. There's two things I would put forward. One, you can just start dirty on your own with the right expectations, right? You don't necessarily need to work with me and my team. Love to help you out. And we'll talk about that in a second. But even on your own, even just to help with this disconnected marketing, if you could just get on a Zoom with a customer and just say like, hey, this is going to be my podcast. It's called something dirty, right? It's some word, some name. And just, I have a good friend wrote a book, Start Dirty, right? Start ugly. Don't even worry, but just start. And what you'll find is have a conversation with a customer, ask them about their day, ask them about what their challenges are, what they're excited about, what the next step is. Like, just get to know them. That reflects so positively in your marketing. All those things we talked about, those campaigns, those ads, those things that have stopped working are going to start working again, because you're going to start learning things within the first 5 minutes of having these conversations. You're going to learn those things that you haven't been keeping up with, like what the challenge actually is and maybe how your company actually solves it, right? So even that knowledge, worth a conversation. And then you throw that bad boy up on YouTube and you just let it roll, right? Just roll the dice and just put it up there, because I will argue this method that we talk about, we call it connection casting. It doesn't even matter. Get this. It doesn't even matter if anyone listens to it. Why? Because your guest is the most important, is the value. The guest is the value. So if you get a great relationship with this guest, their current customer, even start with a current customer, and you help build up that relationship a little bit, maybe they're going to re-sign next time. Maybe they're not going to leave you because you reached out and connected with them. And now you're going to be able to speak more of their language. So start ugly, start dirty, get on a Zoom, just get a couple questions, even ask ChatGPT. I don't care. Get 5 questions that honors your guest. Start a little ugly. Now, I will say, if you want this thing to really go the distance and you want to look like, maybe not ugly, maybe your deals are pretty big and it's worth looking like $1 million for these people. That's where it starts helping, working with a company who can help you with that guesting. One of the things you mentioned that, you got to get the guest scheduled. Well, guess what? People reschedule all the time and it's a giant pain in the butt. So having a producer on your side who can do all your guesting for you. And in fact, how we do it is you just tell us who's a dream customer, not like a good one, who's a dream customer. I would love to have this company. I have no business talking to them. They would never pick up my sales call. Well, we can literally get them on the phone with you in a week or two to be a guest on your show, right? So that's some of the value of working with a team. And of course, we'll produce it, but then we'll also promote it socially. So it can help having a team, but either way, you just got to get those conversations going.
Yep, absolutely. Getting it going. I like that. To what degree do you lean on then, maybe not lean is the right term, but encourage the customer who you're featuring to promote everything, right? And you mentioned getting the social links out there, and this is really a feature for them. And I found a lot of the value is we've had a lot of people who this is their first podcast, right? That they've ever done, which is it's very cool, right? And they're thrilled to be on. And honest to your point, maybe they don't care if anyone listens because it gets all packaged up and it gets edited and it looks nice. And then they get links. that they can use after, and we'll usually give them a short that they can put on their socials, so it looks big that they can then promote to their customer base. What do you guys do, or what do you encourage, both from maybe an advice standpoint, and then also with Ringmaster's best practices for?
Yeah, you're a great example, man. I'm so glad the people listening to this podcast, it has been right in front of you this entire time, right? That's exactly right. For me, it's like if the guest has a good experience, they are way more likely to promote the show. That's why a real bit of thought has to go into what are you going to call it, but also what kind of questions do you ask? Those are things that my team helps you come up with, because there are bad questions to ask. And notice, Brett, you didn't ask this. Like, one of the worst ones I've seen is the very first question. I've just met you and you ask, what's the biggest failure you've had in life?
Ooh,
right?
Tough.
That's an interesting question to ask. And I don't know you, so if I have to answer that, I'm going to give you some flowery non sequitur answer, like I don't know, you're not trying hard enough and blah blah blah, right? But I'm not going deep on that question. You need to build up a relationship before you can get to some of those kind of questions. So you need questions where your guest can really knock it out of the park. We did some prep work together, and I said, you know what, this question, I can't wait I want to gnaw on that question. You're like, let's do it, right? And because the show is not about like, oh, my own personal curiosity as much as let's make you a rock star and let's get you in the best light. If your guest crushes it, they're stoked. They can't wait to share it. I once had an interview with someone and I shared a learning lesson about how I screwed up a vacation in Miami one time, where I checked my work email when I was out with the family and I shouldn't have. And people can probably relate to this. You do that. And there was a stupid email that didn't really matter from a person that didn't really matter. But it just irked me. And the whole rest of the day, I'm thinking about that stupid person instead of being in the tropical pool in Miami, right? And so I shared this. But you know what? I talk about it now, but I don't actually share that video with anybody, right? But now, if it can help people, great. But I'm not nearly as happy to share me being an idiot. And they even named it something like, how to screw up your vacation, your family vacation. It's like, guys, like, I'm glad you made good content for you, but that doesn't put me in a good light. If you made it like, hey, CEO realizes the value of family or something, that's cool, right? So you got to think about your audience. One of my most popular podcast episodes from my pod is not the famous person, right? It's not the, oh, look at me with my 9 books and my 5 exits and this and that, all my millions of dollars. It's a VP of sales from Texas who has a small regional business. And you know what? He felt so well represented on his call with me that he shares his episode with every single one of his prospects for his company. He says, look, I talked about who I serve and how I serve them. Listen to this podcast before you buy from me. If you like what you heard, let's sign up. If you don't, no problem. So I've had thousands and thousands of visits. And if you think about it, thousands of introductions to my brand by promoting his brand, by helping him suss that out and pull that out. And I feel like your podcast does a great job of this, right? You're taking different people and you're saying, let me draw out the value here and then present that to my audience. And then you just feel so good. I can't wait to share this on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Yeah. Can't wait for it. No, I was kind of chuckling at the, nod my head, I guess, at your examples, Casey, because the vacation, I totally get it. You do the same thing. It's your own company. You check your phone. Yep. And when it's the only email that you check all day, it's the one thing you think about. I've done the same walking through Legoland with the family, and you check and it's always kind of a problem. And you're like, well, I'm not even dealing with this problem now. Why did I just invite that into?
To make it worse, it wasn't even a customer. It was a vendor who was like, where's my $120? And the company was dealing with like thousands of invoices and there's an AP system. So what it was just like, it was annoying and kind of disrespectful. So it just like triggered the heck out of me. And here I am like in a 2-layered pool and my kids are splashing around. And it's like, I screwed that up. But you could see how like I'm not sharing that episode with people, Now, if you ask me that question midway through, like in this podcast, I'm able to say that midway through because it's like, yeah, we're getting vulnerable. We've taught some things. Here's some things I didn't do right, and it's much better if you place the questions in the right order.
Yeah, good point. And I've had that experience too. I think I've got a podcast out there where they called me the Psycho Sass serial entrepreneur or something. And that was the same idea, right? It was kind of going for a wild headline. And I think I said something that, and you know how it goes, Casey, when you're starting your own company is where you you can't help but keep starting companies, or you see a solution or you see a problem and you want to come up with solutions. I think I said like, oh, I think there's something wrong with me. And then that, you kind of run
They
with that.
called you a psycho. It was like psycho success.
And that's the title, right? So then that's a tough one to your point, promote, right? Because you're not going to send that out there on your personals and stuff because it's, sensationalistic.
Hey, look at this loser. Now, if they were like, look at this guy, he is like, he has success pouring out his ears. I'd be like, oh, maybe I do, but like psycho, like, come on.
Yeah, it's different, right? Exactly. So it's all, you can always frame this stuff differently. And I'm like, well, you can call what you want. Like, it's your podcast. You can call what you want. Didn't bother me, but again, you're not going to go out of your way to
not going to go out.
Go big for it. So I do want to close with Ringmaster, but before we get there, Casey, I just want to maybe compare notes with you on what someone can do to get started a podcast. And we just start, and I love that term, dirt, just quick and dirty. Like, what do you need to get going? I would say, a camera is great. I got the camera first. It was kind of a pain to get the camera and get it all hooked up. You probably don't need it. You can probably just do it. I think it's more important, in my opinion, just to get started. So really, I think you can get started with your own laptop. I do think a microphone helps, but you can get a good one for under $100. Other than that, it's just kind of your time, and then to get a few guests. Am I missing anything in terms of getting started? Because I'm thinking through it from there. Then you can just upload it to YouTube, and that's probably the base. You can always do the other podcast stuff, but just at a base level, is there anything I'm missing? Anything you would add from someone who's listening? It's like, hey, man, I love that quick and dirty term. I want to get started today. What else, Casey, is there?
Yeah, great list that you have there too. I'd add a name to it, right? So it needs a name, and it's not just because we're marketers. One of the things we found with this kind of podcasting, connection casting, right? You're trying to connect to your market. The goal of the name is to get the guest to come on the show. So it's not to make me look like a rock star. It's to get the guest to come on. They see the name, they go, yeah, I would fit that. I could probably listen to that. And in fact, I'd be honored to be on it. So thinking about the name, think about who you're trying to talk to and maybe what's the good thing about them, right? So, we've even had one example. There's a podcast that we work with someone who works with optometrists, right? A little out of our typical realm, but you know what? He supports their back end. He supports, funny, right? Their office back end. And so, they go be doctors and he'll do the business stuff behind them. But he wants to work with people who have more than one office. So he said, here's who we're looking for. And we go and we find these people for him. But man, we need a name for this podcast. So we helped come up with these things. And one of the ones we came up with for him, and we went with this, is Optometrist Building Empires, right?
Good.
So fun.
I love that.
So fun.
That's good.
There is a line out the door of these optometrists with more than one practice who would be great customers for him, who would love to be on the podcast. And when they get invited, they're like, really? Me? Hell yeah. I'd love to do that. So much so that the Indiana University School of Optometry promoted this thing as like the badass thing to be on, which only just made the mystique of the whole thing that much cooler for all the other optometrists out there who maybe only have one office who can't get on this thing yet, but maybe one day they will, right? So the name can really bring it all together. People have ideas or thoughts. They can always shoot me a note, shoot me an email. We can always riff on it. Use AI, use whatever you want, but just keep it focused on your guests.
Yeah, that's great advice, Casey. So with that, how can people find you, follow you, communicate with you, have a fun chat like this? Follow Ringmaster. Give us all the contact info, please. Totally.
Easy peasy. Casey, CASEY at ringmaster.com. Simple, right? Hit me up there. There's also LinkedIn. If you shoot me a note on LinkedIn, we'll definitely connect, and you'll see every time I have a podcast or my own show go live, I'm really noisy, but I'm not noisy about myself. I'm noisy about my guests. And that's a different kind of noise. It cuts through all that other chatter we were talking about earlier. So connect with me on LinkedIn, obviously ringmaster.com. You can check out the different shows that are on there. Get some ideas for what you might call your podcast. But yeah, shoot me a note, Casey at Ringmaster. Let's chat. Even if we're not necessarily a good fit, if I can point you in the right direction to just help you reconnect with your customer, that would just make me happy.
That's great. By the way, when did you get that domain? Has that been on it for 25 years? As I'm putting the URL in, I was like, I got to have this. I'm doing my pre-show research. I was like, this can't be the domain. This is It's like
It is the domain.
This is big time. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, I arm wrestled a clown and I beat a trapeze artist in a game of poker and I won that domain. And so we're going to hold on to it for a bit.
Yeah, that's a keeper. That is good. Yeah. Casey, thanks so much for joining us. It's been so much fun chatting with you about the podcast, small business stuff. This has been awesome. Awesome conversation.
Brett, dude, you are the man. You know, we've just met on this podcast, but just a great example of connect to market, man. I'm already a fan. I can't wait to talk offline after this about how we can work together. And I will just say one thing for those listening. If you freaking like this episode, then go ahead and rate this podcast. That really helps Brett out. He's doing this for you. He's not getting paid. He's not even asking you to pay for anything. So go rate this thing so more people find out about it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Something we should always ask for on the pod. Appreciate it, Casey.